Hello, you guys, and welcome to the scariest prediction video you'll see today. Just kidding. I digress, and this isn't going to be like that. But without further ado, let's get into it for this week's picks on Sunday. Starting off, we obviously have the Atlantic Falcons visiting the New England Patriots. The Falcons obviously suffering a abysmal loss on Sunday. I don't know what it is about this team. I don't know what it is about them playing teams like Miami, where Miami just looks, hey, like they're resurrected, but they're not resurrected because they lose and they get stomped Thursday night. And overall, I just don't know what to think about the Falcons. Overall, I think this is kind of the doomsday for them. You know, they face a couple tough opponents the next 2 weeks. New England, who is coincidentally battling with Indianapolis, who play the Falcons the week after. You know, overseas, obviously, the Falcons and Indianapolis is over in Europe. But looking at this is kind of a do or die game. Because if you lose, 2 games in a row now, as the Falcons, you're in panic mode. You're at 3-6 with 7 games left on the schedule. And you do not have a bye. And the last win you had that, looked convincing, but maybe it just goes to show you Buffalo's defense really isn't that good, was against Buffalo, where you did still only score 24. It's not like it was some crazy win. But you go against San Fran, you get rolled by them. You go against Miami, you get rolled by them, even worse than San Fran. And Miami looks like a lost team who just got rid of their GM. I don't know what more to say about Atlanta. It's so bizarre to me. They don't really have injuries. Obviously, yes, you had Kirk Cousins play last week, but you should have been able to run the football against this Dolphins D. Like this maybe it was the one game out of the year that the Dolphins play defense. I just don't get it. Like, you don't have a plethora of injuries. And I mean, Kirk Cousins, what, it isn't like he threw the game away for you or anything like that, but it's like, I guess on the defensive side, yeah, you have Billy Bowman out. Jesse Bates is a little banged up. Jalen Walker's still a little banged up. Leonard Floyd, Zach Harrison a little banged up, but it's like that isn't the strength of your team in my eyes, that it's like, oh, this should affect you. And you should have been able to like do something, to contain A-Chain with your defense or something, and been able to defend the pass a little bit. Because they have limited weapons on the Dolphins. So I am not going with the Falcons in this game. 5.5 points. I would go with 10 for New England. So I'm going with New England in this game. Moving on, we have Chargers, Titans. Obviously, the Titans, not a great season. They fire their head coach, Cam Ward. Unfortunate for him, but it seems the fate of all these like really early draft picks, that unless your team like invests heavily and does like a game-changing draft, like I guess the Texans did 2 years ago, and then obviously the Commanders were, maybe a QB away, but they've regressed this year, so maybe they weren't. It's kind of crazy, that we finally have a first round overall pick that is struggling again since the first time since Bryce Young, obviously. But looking at, this game, obviously the Chargers won a convincing win against a Vikings team that looks lost. They don't have a crazy amount of injuries or anything like that besides to the running backs, but I like what Kamani Vidal has done. And overall their O-line is getting healthier, where, Joe Alt is fully healthy now. Mekhi Becton is only questionable. And then the defense, we've had Khalil Mack back for a few weeks now. Odafe Owe has had an impact. Derwin James is, a mad baller. Tarheeb still is kind of an unfortunate injury that is out for this game, but I don't really think they'll need them, especially considering that you're not getting enough time as Cam Ward to really, make an impact in the passing game. And I don't think that your run game is good enough to really go and play the Chargers and keep Herbert off the field. So looking at this game, I'm of course going to go with the Chargers to win against the Titans, who are just a lost team and lack the talent appropriate to be able to win a game like this against a team that, they really need to they really need to keep winning, because if the Chiefs somehow win this week and you got the Broncos who have, a game that they can win, you don't want to fall further behind in your division. So against a weaker opponent, this is kind of a must win. And I guess the interesting thing about Tennessee is that Jeffrey Simmons is out. Arden Key is out. Xavier Woods is out. I'm kind of looking at this with the Titans that they're probably going to trade some of these guys. They're probably going to try and shore up on a lot of draft capital so that they can do something, next year, because you cannot tell me that they're doing anything this year where they only have one win through 8 games. So I'm going with the Chargers, pretty sure about this one. Moving on, we have Bears-Bengals. Interesting thing about this is that while Caleb hasn't been playing well, and I'm not just saying that as a Packers fan, he's had like an abysmal amount of yards each of the last 2 games, and it's only been getting worse. DeAndre Swift, who was doing well, is out for this game. So you have Kyle Monangai that's shown flashes, but he's obviously a younger player. And then you have Travis Homer, who, I guess if you're a homer of the Bears, you can, ride that pun till the end of days, because I don't know enough about him to give you a reason, because Roshan Johnson is also out. So you're looking to Rome Odunze to kind of carry this offense, and he was having a lot of magic, and he was, making sure that Caleb had a viable receiving target for weeks and weeks, but it seemingly has gotten to a point where Caleb Williams is not doing anything unless it's the opening drive or the opening quarter. And it looks, and it's interesting with Ben Johnson saying they're adding 25 plays to the playbook every week. Like, how many plays are you expecting to have in this playbook? And it just seems like it's going to overload this team, more specifically Caleb Williams, and it's going to be rough for you. And it's wild because I was looking at advanced stats. Caleb Williams has had a very solid amount of time in the pocket this year. I'm not going to pull up the stat myself. You can go look at it on NFL.com. But I think he had he was either the most or he was top 5 in the league, where it's then that sort of thing. Now, the other thing, I guess, about the Bears is their defense. You have guys coming back from injury like Tyreek Stevenson. CJ Gardner-Johnson got brought in as a free agent, and he's playing nickelback, and he knows this. He knows this defense. Is what I've heard and what I've gathered, and that sort of things. But then you have Nahshon Wright. Who's heard of Nahshon Wright? So I'm worried because even though Cincinnati, they have the injury concern where Flacco might not play. It's just, I think that Flacco is going to tough it out and he's going to play. And after suffering a terrible defeat last week where you should have beat the Jets, you allowed them to get their first win. I think you look at this game as a huge get right, where it's Chase, Higgins, and Yoshi Voss are going to play very, very well. And regardless of, the pass rush for Cincy, because Trey Hendrickson is doubtful, and Logan Wilson, I guess, is doubtful, who's demanded a trade, and who knows, they're probably just not playing him because maybe they will deal him, and even though they said they wouldn't. But on a side note, I think that, it doesn't really matter too much that unless the Bears get a really solid run game going with their depleted halfback core, I think you're going to be able to put up more points than Chicago with this. And I think that, these guys are really going to kind of school Chase and Higgins are going to school the Bears and expose their secondary, because they, obviously they haven't had Jalen Johnson all year, but it doesn't help. So yeah, I'm actually going with Cincinnati, who obviously they're in a much better spot within their weak division than the Bears are, following a really bad loss against Tyler Huntley. So I really do think that, and I mean, they can't stop the run. So I think Chase Brown can have a big game this game that I don't think many people aren't really talking about, because they probably, and kind of with reason, you could probably win this game with just Chase and Higgins dominating, but and even Noah Fant, but it's like Chase Brown is this kind of icing on the cake. I'm going with the Bengals for this game. But moving on, we have Colts Steelers. Obviously, as we all know, the Steelers lost a tough one on the road at home against the Packers, a team they hadn't lost to at home since 1970. You look at the game, and they were able to kind of dominate most of the game, but they were never really able to just outright pull ahead of the Packers. And my Packers came back, and Jordan Love, dropped some dimes of passes, and Emmanuel Wilson as the running back did a very good job. Now they host the Colts, which apparently the Colts have not beaten Pittsburgh at home since, I think they said, like 2011 or something like that. Like, it's been a while. Not nearly as long as last week, obviously, but for an in-conference matchup, that is a while. Now you look at Indy, though, and they are clearly the best team in the AFC, performing with the most consistency, and they're very healthy. And you look at their team, and it's just very, very well-rounded. I don't think there's any sort of problem with it. And I mean, yeah, a lot of it doesn't like fly off the pages for you, but they have a very solid unit, and a unit that, has been brought together by Daniel Jones. Indiana Jones, I think, has a really good shot to dice up the Steeler defense. And Jonathan Taylor, I mean, don't forget to mention him. I think that he can really put the hurt on the Pittsburgh defense. And while I would like to be able to go with Pittsburgh, to potentially win this game at home, I just don't see it. I don't see Jaylen Warren being able to pop off and get out or anything like that. I don't see this defense that has kind of showed a lack of creativity to be able to do enough to stop Jonathan Taylor. And it's worrisome with how many missed tackles these guys have had. And it's like last week, yeah, they stacked the box and were able to stop Josh Jacobs, but he hasn't been having a good year. Jonathan Taylor has just been having an unbelievable year. And I think that his run blocking scheme on the Colts offense is way, way, way better than how the Packers have been performing, if I'm being honest with you. Well, it's been serviceable run game. It hasn't been anything special. So yeah, I'm going with the Colts, to get this win on the road and further solidify that they're a team that isn't to be trifled with. 49ers Giants. The Giants, unfortunately, as we know, Scattaboo gets hurt. He's placed on IR. Now it is the Tyrone Tracy Jr. show once again, which I don't mind. I think he was, he had been making progress year in and year out and that sort of thing. But it seems to me like since he's come back from his injury, he doesn't fit the vibe of this team, like a smash mouth, gritty team. Now, the thing that I'll say, though, is that you finally have Darius Slayton fully healthy, Wan'Dale Robinson. Obviously, you're without Malik Neighbors, as we all know. But this is a team that I think has some decent talent, and Jackson Dart can use that, and he's been throwing beautifully, and he's been doing very well. obviously their right tackle Jermaine Illuminor is doubtful. So that would mean Marcus Mambeau is next up on the depth chart, who I don't really know too much about. But looking at San Fran, obviously the pass rush with them was weakened when Bosa got hurt for the year. And you obviously have, Michael Williams and then Bryce Huff. But Bryce Huff is actually out, and so is Gross Matos. So you have Robert Beal Jr., good name, but I have nothing on this guy. Or Sam Okiyananu. Okay. I was trying to get that right, you guys. Sorry for butchering that. But looking at this, I just wonder if San Fran, with their skids recently within their last, game, getting really dominated by the Texans, and then, even the Buccaneers, I guess, a couple games ago, and the Falcons, I don't even want to consider. They were only able to put up 20, and Brock Purdy's not playing, so Mac Jones is starting. So I kind of look at this where I think that, the Niners aren't going to be able to really run the football very well with McCaffrey, who actually is not having that great of a year, if we're being honest with you, from what we're used to in terms of the run game. They've been having to get him the ball in other ways, and he's been kind of that guy to be like, hey, you've got to carry this team or nothing is going to happen. Jawan Jennings hasn't really done that much. Kendrick Bourne is, he's been a breath of fresh air with Mac Jones, so maybe he could have a big game. But overall, I just don't think that New York does that. And, I think that Kittle has to do something where he has a big game. And I think this game could be close. But overall, I'm actually kind of leaning towards New York, to pick this kind of oddball game where it's like they've been competing a lot. I think that they just kind of rally to it. And I think that they can have enough players and put enough pressure on Mac Jones to where he's not going to be able to, do as much with, because of their, and the shaky O-line of the 49ers, where, Jake Brendel is out for this game as well. So I'm going with the Giants as kind of one of my bolder takes. I think that the Niners could win, but I'm going with, the Giants for this game at home, where San Fran has to travel across the country. Moving on to Broncos-Texans. An interesting game here where the Broncos, are 6-2, and the Texans have had one of these resurgence where, 2 games ago, you lose a game to the Seahawks, who have been very good, but you're able to put up some decent points. You win against the 49ers, who I was like, I don't think that they're winning this game, but they've really come alive. They came alive, offensively, which is kind of amazing. And now they play the Broncos. The Broncos played a game last week where Patrick Surtain didn't play most of the game, and they played a much better wide receiver duo than what is on the Texans. And they were able to ultimately make sure that CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens did not beat them on the Cowboys, and they were able to expose Dak, who I think had been having a really pretty good year up until last week. But Patrick Surtain is out for this game, really sucks. But I think the guys that they have and the way that they played without him last week, I think they're kind of prepared for this. I don't think that you really look at Riley Moss and then Jaquan McMillan and I guess, Jahdae Barron, who obviously is going to have to step up, I think. He's going to get plugged in. But looking at, I guess, the problem for me with the Texans is their O-line. You look at the Denver Broncos, who have gotten sack after sack after sack after sack, and it's going to be like that for CJ Stroud, and he just doesn't do well under pressure. So I don't know why this game is ranked so close where the Houston Texans are favorited. I just don't get that. So I'm picking the Broncos because I think they're really going to get after Stroud. I don't think they're going to really establish a run game for the Texans. And I just overall don't believe that they have the offense capable of outscoring the Broncos, who finally put on a heater of a game and showed that even though Marvin Mims is out for this game, which is a pretty bad blow, J.K. Dobbins, R.J. Harvey, Cortland Sutton, and Troy Franklin, who's been playing very well, can do this. And even Pat Bryant's looked good from time to time. So I think that the Broncos are just the better team, and they're going to walk out of Texas with a win here. Moving on, we have Vikings-Lions. This game, as much as I would like for the Vikings to be able to beat the Lions in some crazy turn of events where they get back up to 500 after getting, killed by, Philadelphia and then the Chargers, where they gave up a lot of points in both of those games. I just don't see how the Vikings win this game. They obviously have J.J. McCarthy playing, and then Mac Brosmer is his backup. If you didn't hear, Carson Wentz with his shoulder had season-ending surgery on it, so he is on IR. And then you kind of look at the Vikings and the way that you would be able to maybe beat this team would be to pass it, but McCarthy looked crazy pedestrian most of the time. And while maybe the time away was good for him, and they're really kind of banking on him coming back and being the leader that he is, because I do think he's a good leader, and I think that he does have the gumption to be, he's made, it's on very limited details. So it's like, I'm saying this with a grain of salt that it's like he obviously hasn't done a lot in the league, but it's like he can make good throws and tight window throws, and he's got the weapons that you think on this team that you would need with Jefferson, Addison, Naylor, Ty Felton we haven't seen a lot of, but he's good. TJ Hawkinson, has kind of underperformed in my opinion since he's got here. Like, he's good and he's good for catches occasionally, but he doesn't really take over games like he did. And obviously with a guy like Jefferson, it's hard for him to do that, but you would just think that. And then, Christian Darrisaw, Brian O'Neill are both dealing with injuries. You look at the rest of the O-line, and Donovan Jackson hasn't looked great, and he's obviously going to be going up against Aleem McNeil, which doesn't give me reassurance, where it's like one of his toughest assignments, of the year so far. And, you don't run the football, so you're essentially sending McCarthy out there to, like, airmail this. And, you look at Detroit, and they do say they're getting people back in the secondary, that's going to improve their defense. I do agree with that with Brian Branch. Amik Robertson has been good. He's been kind of that secret weapon cornerback, that's played well and spicy for them. Terrion Arnold is back, but is he an upgrade? Like, I honestly feel like Rockison was kind of playing his ball, his heart out and doing well in most of these games with, his couple penalties here or there. But Terrion Arnold, since entering the league, has just been he's gotten flagged a lot. So that doesn't really blend confidence when, is Jefferson going to be on him? This and this and that. And obviously they're probably going to double Jefferson. But can these other guys cover Addison, who is so slippery? We'll see. And that's the thing that you hope. You hope that the Vikings can somehow get these guys open and that they're able to keep up with the rushing attack of the Lions, because their run defense is pretty shoddy. So it's like if you're competing in this game, it's probably going to be a shootout unless your defense somehow finds the way to revive their run defense. And Van Ginkel is returning and playing in this game, which I think is a huge addition. He's a very, very, very good, rushing linebacker that just he's a football player and he plays with a lot of grit and a lot of tenacity and a lot of awareness. And he would make, a lot of plays for the Vikings that are very, very, very good. And it's one of those that if the Vikings can get some sort of a turnover at some point, which I think that potentially they could, then maybe they could swing this game. But looking at this, I hate to say it, but I'm going with the Lions at home. And unless the Vikings have a revelation and they turn this season around in a big way, I just don't see it. As much as I would like to, as much as I would love to laugh at the Lions losing to the Vikings, who have had a struggle bus last 2 weeks, I do not see it. So I'm picking the Lions, and we'll see you Sunday. Panthers-Packers. The last time the Panthers played the Packers was in Bryce Young's rookie year. Joe Barry was still the DC for the Packers, and we obviously didn't have Micah Parsons, and we had a lot of, similar pieces on the defense. But looking at this game, I think it's going to be a whole lot different. The Packers obviously coming off a very, where they came together full circle last week at the end of the game where the offense was connecting. You didn't have the run game, like I said, that you would want besides Emmanuel Wilson, I guess. But you had a passing attack where Love was orchestrating some really, really good plays. And Tucker Kraft really emerged, and people are talking about him as a top 3 tight end, which I agree with. And all of the analytics kind of say that, like, if you give this guy the ball a little bit more, like, he's going to be producing like a top tight end talent. So, and I think that bringing, Christian Watson back, bringing him back. No, him coming back from injury really is helping this offense. So looking at this, the O-line is finally fully healthy. You've got Christian Watson coming back. So the only wide receivers you're missing is Dontavian Wicks, who hasn't played in a couple weeks. And obviously Jaden Reed, who had that, the broken collarbone weeks ago. And they say he's set to come back sometime in November. And then a defense where they are fully healthy. And Quay Walker has a nagging injury. But you look at this team and only a few injuries. Lucas Van Ness, obviously backup flex, rotational pass rusher. Nick Neiman, who's a special teamer, was of great concern, which does suck. And that sort of thing. Not like that, but if you're able to score a lot on offense as the Packers, I think that you are kind of looking at a team that isn't going to have to punt a lot and is going to be able to score a lot. And the Carolina Panthers, while they've been having, their best season since, I guess, 2021 was the last time they had a winning record, I just don't see how you're going to guard the plethora of wide receivers you're going to have to deal with. And you look at kind of the analytics, and I was kind of looking at it for Golden. He's been getting a lot of separations, but he just hasn't been getting the balls thrown his way, which is unfortunate. And while Bryce Young is playing in this game, I just don't think with his banged up O-line that they're going to be able to protect him well enough to where it's like, oh, he's going to be upright enough to be able to get it to these guys, to get it to Tet McMillan, Xavier Legette. And Rico Dowdle being the leading back is kind of interesting to me now that they list him, because they had list Chuba when he came back, but now it's Rico Dowdle. I think the Packers with their run defense and the speedy guys, Rico Dowdle's going to have a hard time breaking off big runs. Don't get me wrong, I think he can, but I'm kind of looking at this game where I'm like, how is the Panthers offense going to be able to keep up with the Packers offense? And it is in Lambeau, so it's going to be loud, it's going to be a hostile environment, and I just think the Packers can control this game, so I'm going with the Packers. Jaguars Raiders. Interestingly enough, Travis Hunter suffered an injury in Thursday's practice. not a good sign because they actually put him on IR, you guys. Even on, the depth chart that I'm looking at, he's still listed, second after Brian Thomas Jr., who's been dealing with an injury. And there was talks about him being a potential trade target, which I think is kind of ridiculous. The guy's only a second-year player, and he was balling out last year when overall your offense was stagnant. So you get rid of him, and who do you have? Obviously you would have had Travis Hunter, but he suffered a bad injury apparently. Parker Washington, whom I like, but he's a young player and hasn't gotten much action, and De'Ami Brown, because Tim Patrick is also out. So looking at Jacksonville, they are going to really, 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 to me, have to lean on this run game. I don't think that they can keep on incessantly passing it and expect that to work when you have Brian Thomas Jr. banged up. Parking Washington is young. De'Ami Brown is young as well. And it's like Hunter Lawn is good, but it's not like you're going to game plan around Hunter Lawn. And you are playing the Raiders. So if you are scheming pass a lot, you worry about their defense being able to swing the game for them because of who they have pass rushing, obviously, with, Max Crosby. And then you look at Malcolm Kuntz. You look at Laialu, who's been really, decent this year. I don't think the Raiders' defense is the reason for their struggles this year. I think it's this lackluster offense, which is wild because I'm looking at this, and the only two guys they have injured on the offense is Aiden O'Connell, who's been on IR, and Cole Miller, he's obviously, their tackle, but I just don't understand why the Raiders can't perform well. And I mean, I do look at one guy essentially, and it's Geno Smith with the interceptions and that sort of thing. So looking at this, is this a get right game for them for Las Vegas? Maybe. To be honest, I honestly think that this is kind of a game of that's kind of a crapshoot, if I'm being honest with you. I think that you look at Jacksonville, I think they do have just a more consistent defense with two decent pass rushers with Walker and Hines Allen. So I'm going to give them the win just because, I don't really believe in Geno Smith this year. Like, he's playing pretty bad football and throwing bad football. So I'm going with Jacksonville, despite not having a crazy amount of confidence. Moving on to Saints-Rams. This game is going to be the shortest analysis. The Saints, while they were performing like decent at the beginning of the year and putting up a decent amount of points, they've been getting worse and worse and worse. And to me, it was kind of a telltale sign that even when the Bears, didn't look great, they were able to just kind of put away the Saints, and the Saints didn't put up that much of a fight. You look at, Tyler Shuck starting now. What are we going to see from him? Is he going to be able to really do anything against this Rams defense? I really don't think so. You guys. It'll be interesting, but I kind of look at the Saints defense, and I'm like, they need to be able to stop Stafford, who's been on fire, and they're also getting back Puka Nacua, who is fully healthy, and obviously they came off a bye. They just had their bye week. I don't know why I second guessed that. They just had their bye week. So you have fully recharged Stafford, Kyron Williams, Puka, Devontae, and Jordan Whittington. Unfortunately, Tutu Atwell on IR, which kind of sucks because he is a good target for Stafford on occasion for big gains and, sneaky gains, as I like to call him, because he's a smaller guy. But Tyler Higbee playing well, and just overall this offense is clicking. And, the O-line is healthy. And, this defense, I don't really think I need to say much about this defense where it's like Jared Verse leading the charge and overall just feisty DBs that I think are kind of underrated, if I'm being honest with you. Yeah, they traded for a corner, but it wasn't so that they could start him. It's because they wanted depth, I get, at that, and to kind of let these guys know that, like, hey, if you start performing badly, we're going to replace you type of move, in my opinion, which is always fun. But I'm going to give this game to the Rams. Not much needs to be discussed, I think, here. And the Saints, good luck with Shuck. Moving on, we have Chiefs-Bills in Buffalo. This game obviously is reminiscent of last year, where the Bills, by a lot of people's accounts, were robbed, and the replay was weird. And overall, I don't think you should rely on replay. I think that's what the Bills learned. And I think, against a team like this, you should go balls to the walls. Isaiah Pacheco is out, so it'll be Kareem Hunt. A little bit less of an explosive back, thankfully, but a guy who isn't exactly the easiest to bring down. I don't know what you would want to play as the Bills, as their defense is, not really doing much to contain anybody and, do much of anything. And then you also look at, you have you have Cole Bishop and Jordan Bayer, Tre'Davious White, Christian Benford, and then Taron Johnson is a little banged up. Ed Oliver is on IR, who is your best defensive player. Greg Rousseau and Joey Bosa haven't been playing terribly, and thankfully Joey Bosa is still healthy. And overall, Shaq Thompson is unfortunately out, who had been adding kind of a flair to that linebacker room. Like, they have sound linebackers, but it's not like, hey, a game-changing linebackers, and Shaq Thompson with his speed can bring some flair. So looking at this game, it's hard for me to pick who I want to give this game to. Josh Simmons is out as well. Trey Smith is a little banged up, but like against this depleted, without Ed Oliver, I'm kind of like, Trey Smith isn't letting anybody past him. Yeah, he's one of the best guards in the league, you guys. And then you look at the defense. I do think that they're going to give Cook some problems, which means it's going to be the Josh Allen show. And these teams just know each other so well. And I hate to say this, but I do think that the Chiefs kind of announced that, hey, we're back by beating the Bills at home. And they don't leave it up to chance. So I am giving this game to the Chiefs because the Bills, to me, just don't have a defense that's going to stop enough. Unless they somehow get enough pressure on Mahomes, but I don't see it. And I just expect Mahomes to, create magic and to do what he does to really strain this defense all game, so they're going to win. And because they have an actual defense that's going to play hard. Now, moving on to Sunday night, we have Seahawks going to visit the Commanders. The Seahawks coming off a bye. They are... Oh my goodness. They are without Jake Bobo, you guys. But who cares? Because they have JSN, Cooper Kupp, and Torrey Horton, who has kind of emerged as a guy that they need to get him a little more involved. And I think that he can, start to hopefully develop and become more incorporated with this offense. Because Cooper Kupp has done some good things, made some catches. But I think that Torrey Horton is kind of that secret spice to put this offense over the top, because your run game hasn't been what I would want. And I've been saying this for years. You got Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, who could arguably be one of the best tandems in the league, but you just don't have the blocking. You just don't have the blocking, and you've drafted some old linemen that are good, and you're obviously getting by quite a bit with, airmailing it to JSN, but imagine you get to one of these games and he gets taken out of the mix. What are you going to fall back on? Because right now it's not Horton, and right now it's not the running game either. But people are like, oh, he's undefensible, and it's like, for now, until they see what they've been doing all season, and then he becomes, a real focal point. But thinking about this Seattle Seahawks team against Washington, you have the only key focal point on defense that is out is Julian Love. But by the way I see it, you've got Kobe Bryant, and then Nick Emenwari has been flying around and playing very, very good football, being just everywhere with his speed. A very, very, very good player, and he looks like he's going to be around for a while based on how he's come in and he's played, and he's got a lot of confidence. You also got Devin Witherspoon coming back. And, interestingly enough, they're now plugging him as an outside corner, which I think he can fully do, and then Rick Woolen as their nickel back, because I think Rick Woolen is a little bit better of a tackler, in all honesty, and he's tall and lengthy enough to cover these smaller slot wide receivers. But looking at this defense, I think they're really going to give Daniels fits. And I think that Daniels, without Scary Terry again in this game, you've got Deebo Samuel, Luke McCaffrey, and Chris Moore. Doesn't exactly instill confidence in me when you're playing a DB room of this talent and they are coached very, very well. And they're just, even if you give up a catch, they're not going to let these guys get far. Like, I don't think Deebo's going to have a Yak King type of game in this game. And Jaden Daniels just hasn't had the magic that he had last year. The one thing that could maybe save, Jaden from having to run around and all this and this sort of thing is if they establish the run game, but they haven't, as high as they were on Krosky Merritt, they just haven't ran it as much. And it's crazy to me. They're fully healthy. Their line, besides Tunzel being minorly banged up, is fully healthy, and they should be trying to run the football to protect Jaden, because he hasn't been looking the most protected despite them addressing the line this offseason, and he shouldn't have to escape every single play. And the lack of talent, Scary Terry is really kind of, has made his case that why he should get paid. Obviously, with being hurt, why he shouldn't be paid, but their offense is just, not the same without him. And Washington Commanders are kind of, they're in that slump. What I kind of predicted before the season, where I thought, when I predicted how many wins this team could have, and they're right on pace for what I predicted as a team that's going to be sub 500 because of the apparent holes that they have. And they don't really have a pass rush. So what are they going to do against Darnold, who has been throwing dimes even when he's had guys coming after him to JSN or whoever? What are the Commanders going to do? They're literally going to keel over at home, and they're going to be embarrassed. I'm going with Seattle. If you've made it to the end, I want to thank you guys for watching. And, we got a good, interesting bout of games on Sunday. And I would like to say happy Halloween to all that watch this. But as always, go Pack Go.